Hi, I'm Chicken Johnny and you're out in the shed with Chicken Johnny. Today I thought I'd show you some of the tools that we use for weeding the garden. Now, we call these cultivation tools because we use them to cultivate. Cultivating means to improve the soil. So anything that you do, like plowing or harrowing or hoeing, fertilizing, even irrigating, is technically cultivation. But when we talk about cultivation, we're talking about one of two things. Either pre-plant cultivation, which is where we go out and level the ground and turn it over so that it's ready to plant into. Or we're talking about weeding. Now we're accomplishing a couple of things when we weed with cultivators. First, we're getting rid of the weeds, and second, we're working the ground so that it will absorb moisture better. This tool is something that a friend of mine designed and built in his shop. It gets hooked behind the tractor and we take it through the field. Now if you look down here, you'll see that there are two blades, and I can move these blades in or out. And this way, as I'm going through the field, I can move them in between plants. When I come up to the plant, I can open it up so that we go by the plant without harming it, come back in and get the weeds. And as we go through the field, moving it back and forth, we remove a lot of the weeds. We call this the inline hoe, and the reason is because the tractor has to go over the top of the plant as we move the handles in and out to go around the plants. Now this tool, because it's being pulled by the tractor, we can cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time, but we still leave some weeds behind. Let's go take a look at some of the other tools we use for cultivating. I'm standing in front of my tool wall. Now you can see various different things, from shovels to scoops. I've got potato forks, I've got a scythe, I've got post hole diggers, picks. But here are some of the tools that we use for removing weeds. This is just a standard steel rake, and we use it to rake through the ground. And this will actually pick up a lot of cotyledons early in the process. So if you're able to get through and rake early in the process, it'll take a lot of weeds out. This is what I call a spade hoe. There's a couple of different ways you can use this. One is to pull it through the ground to make a furrow. I generally use it this way to weed around plants, and you can get around a plant pretty effectively. You can also use this backside to hook a plant and pull it out. I'll take this out in the field and show you how it works. Another tool that we use a lot is a stirrup hole, also known as an action hoe, sometimes called a hula hole. And the way it works is you drag it through the ground and it undercuts the weeds just slightly. If you get this about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch under the ground and pull it back, it'll pull the weeds out. But you can use it in both directions. You can pull back and you can push forward. You can come sideways. You can even use the edge of it to hook a plant. Now, this is probably one of my favorite hoes to use. In fact, I even have a smaller one. And before this video is over, I'm going to show you my new secret weapon, Hula Hoe. Something I recently got in the mail from Haas Tools. But let's go out in the field and I'll show you how to use the Hula Hoe. In this particular row, the weeds have gotten away from us a little bit. So I'm going to use this old standby Spade Hoe, and the way we're going to use it is to hold it sideways and pull it through the ground. Now I can come underneath the leaves of this cabbage and I can move fairly rapidly. Now this ground is wet because it's been raining, and normally you wouldn't want to use a hoe in the rain, in wet soil. You'd want this to dry out. But I can't leave it any longer. I've got to get these weeds out. So I can move fairly rapidly. One of the problems with weeding in wet soil is that mud builds up on the edges of your hoe. So it'd be a good idea to have something with you that you can scrape that off with. I like this hoe because I can move very quickly, and when I get a weed that's really stuck in, I can pull it out. There's a bunch of different ways to use these tools, and we can get these cabbages relatively weed-free in a fairly short amount of time. So this is the Hula Hoe, or Action Hoe. There's a better way. Stirrup Hole, a number of different names for it. And there's a bunch of different companies that make them. Now, in the barn I showed you my narrow Hula Hoe, and that's one that I bought from Johnny's Select Seed, and I paid quite a bit for it. This one I bought at Walmart, and I paid about $30, $35 for it. Now the one from Johnny's is actually higher quality and it's going to last longer, but as far as functionality, this one's just as good. So let's see how this works to remove the weeds. It works much better than the other hoe because I'm not trying to scrape them out, I'm cutting them out. And so I can move fairly quickly and get these weeds out. It's a little harder to get underneath the plants like I was with the other hoe, but we can get through here pretty quickly. And sometimes you just bend down and pull them out. Now, I want to show you one more tool that I like to use. It's a little bit different than a leaf rake because it's got these little metal wires. And what I like to do with this is, after I've weeded, come through and just run through the ground, pulling up any of the weeds that I've pulled out of the ground. Now you'll notice there's a lot of weeds that I didn't get, and I'll come back and get them. I'm just trying to do a demonstration right now. But if you'll notice, in the ground there's very small weeds, little cotyledons that are just starting to come up. And by running this rake through, I'm disturbing the ground just enough that those cotyledons are not going to create a problem. Now, it would be better if the ground were dry and if I was coming in here and raking this stuff out on dry ground. But sometimes you don't have that choice. Sometimes you get a lot of wet weather and you've got to deal with it. Now this year, we've had a lot of dry weather. We're just now getting some wet weather. But because of the way that things work out, the fact that I have to work for a living as well as garden, sometimes you have to use these tools in a less than optimal way. And so there are differences between weeding in dry ground and weeding in wet ground. When you're weeding in wet ground, you're really trying to pull the plants out. When you're weeding in dry ground, you're trying to cut the plants off at the base. All right, let's go back into the shed. I've got something to show you that most you might find exciting. You want to make sure that they get put away. And the reason is these wooden handles will deteriorate very quickly if left to get wet and then sit out in the sun. Now you'll notice that mine they've been out in the sun quite a bit and they've gotten wet quite a bit. That's why I've created this wall to try and store as much of this stuff on as I can. And it's relatively simple. Just a bunch of nails that I can hang things on. Now, don't go away. I'll be right back. So, a couple of days ago, a little over a week ago, I got something in the mail, and it was somewhat of a surprise. Let me show it to you. This is the Haas Tools double wheel hoe. And it's equipped with this action hoe on the bottom. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a review on it. Let me tell you that of all of the tools that I own, every one of them has a specific purpose. And some of them I can do without. Now don't tell my wife that, because when I bought them I told her that I couldn't do without them. This is a tool that I thought I could do without. It's a tool that I didn't think had much application on a big garden like mine. Can't tow it behind the tractor, so I didn't think it was really worth investing in. But let's go out in the field. I'll show you how this works, and then I'll give you my opinion. All right, so I'm going to take this two-wheel hoe, and I'm going to go down. This is butternut squash, and I've got some large areas between the butternut squash. So I've already gone with the tractor and cleaned up both sides. I've only got about a 10-inch area to clean up. And what I want to do is run this hoe right up to that squash, drop it down, and pull back. And now, all of these weeds have been undercut. So all I have to do is take my rake and pull them out. Let me show you again. Just have to make sure that I don't run over any active squash plants. I've got quite a distance here where I didn't get any germination. Cut that nightshade out. And these are all red root amaranth. So you can see I've got quite a ways till I get to my next actual squash plant. And that's about as easy as it gets. I couldn't even do this with a tractor that fast because I've got drip tape underneath these plants, and anything I would take through with a tractor would cut through the drip tape. So I'm very grateful that I have this wheel hoe, and I'm very thankful to whoever made sure I had it. I'm Chicken Johnny. This has been a moment in the field with Chicken Johnny, some hints and tips about cultivating in muddy ground. And one of the things that you've got to do with this is clean this mud off here. This would work much better if the ground were dry, but sometimes you don't have a choice. In Mitzer Shem, I'll see you again. I'm Chicken Johnny. Eat your vegetables.